thanks for watching. This is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a number of reviews in one. My family and I went on vacation to Texas. We got to see my family and our friends from down there, and we were there for about 9 days. I did read some books while I was down there. I've finished some books since I've gotten back. And then I had read I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons before we left, so this is going to be kind of a combination of all of that. So, I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons, of course, is the latest by Peter S. Beagle. Now, I was a fan of The Last Unicorn as a child, and I've been a fan of it ever since. I watched it at least once a year when it came out on TV, those little TVs with the antennas that we had back in my day. And as an adult, after my father moved in with us, he caught me watching it one day. He goes, "Oh, you're watching your favorite movie," because he remembered because I watched it so much as a child. So when I saw he had a new book coming out, I'm Afraid He Forgot Dragons, I was really excited for it, and it didn't let me down. It followed Prince Reginald and Princess Sorceress and Prince Reginald's, footman, I guess, Mortmain, and then Robert, whose real name is Gaius Aurelius something Thrax. It was a mouthful. And the premise of the book is Sorceress, she rejects all these princes who come to call. She sees Prince Reginald in the forest. She falls in love with him because he's the prettiest prince. He doesn't have any princely or manly things under his belt, and he wants to prove himself to his father. So he wants Robert to take him to slay a dragon. And then there's a wizard who has issues with Prince Reginald's father. And it starts out kind of light and almost comical, but it gets really, really dark as it goes on. And in fact, there's this one point where somebody turns somebody into a chair. I'm sorry, not a chair, a throne. Which was quite disturbing. But it was a really good book. I enjoyed it. I read it fairly quickly, but then, like I said, we went on vacation. I didn't get a chance to post the review. Now, while we were on vacation, I read Sorceress Comes to Call, which I got as an eARC from NetGalley. Thank you to NetGalley for the eARC, because I love Kingfisher. Ever since I read, oh my goodness, I can't even remember the name of the first book I read, but it was the one with the willows that was based off of Algernon's The Willows. But I love Kingfisher, and so I was super stoked when I got this approval from NetGalley to read A Sorceress Comes to Call. And it follows Cordelia, and she is the daughter of a sorceress named Evangeline, who doesn't allow doors in their house. Well, she allows there's doors in the house, but she doesn't allow Cordelia to close the doors. She seems to always know what Cordelia is thinking. Cordelia doesn't really have any friends. There is a girl in town that she goes riding with when she's out on her horse, Falada, or the mom's horse, Falada. But basically her best friend is the horse, Falada. Now, I don't normally, in my head when I'm reading, imagine cartoon characters as the characters in the books that I'm reading. I think this is the first time I've imagined a cartoon character as a character. But if you've seen Tangled, Mother Gothel is who I had in my head the entire time as the sorceress Evangeline, and I couldn't get it out of my head. And since Falada's a white horse, you would think that my head would naturally go to the white horse from Tangled, but it didn't, because Falada's actually the mom's familiar, and pretty scary. So the mom had a benefactor in town, and when the benefactor cut her off, she goes looking for somebody to support her and Cordelia, because she can't make it on her own. And so they go to a neighboring town and move in with I forgot his name. She moves in with this man in a neighboring town, but his sister Hester, she immediately recognizes that there's something wrong with Evangeline, but then she sees Cordelia, and she's kind of confused by Cordelia because Cordelia doesn't seem to match her mom. in personality or character-wise. And she starts to learn that Cordelia is afraid of her mom. But there's also some times when Cordelia acts like a completely different person. And the man does end up asking Evangeline to marry him. And Evangeline's actual, like, big plan, because she thinks that this wealthy man is actually Little Fish, her big plan is for her daughter Cordelia to find somebody really wealthy, like wealthy, and marry him, and so that they'll be taken care of and well off for the rest of their lives. Cordelia, after somebody who was visiting a guest at the house that they're staying at, after somebody dies, Cordelia decides that it's time to reveal some of the things that she's been hiding about herself and her mother to Hester. And Hester has the fun task of convincing their friends what is going on and imploring them for help. It was a really fantastic book. If you've read any of T. Kingfisher's books, they're phenomenal. Now, this is apparently based off of a fairy tale called The Goose Girl. I haven't read it, but I have to go read it. Because this was a really phenomenal book. I loved it. What did I read? I read Extinction by Douglas Preston. Now, Douglas Preston has written a series of books with another author, Lincoln Child, and it's the Agent Pendergast series. And I absolutely adore the Agent Pendergast novels. I have also read some books by Lincoln Child. I've read The Forgotten Room and a few others, and I love Lincoln Child's solo books also. I liked this book, but I didn't love it. So it starts with this newlywed couple going out to Erebus resorts, where they have de-extincted some of the Pleistocene animals. I can't remember the name of the era, but they've de-extincted the giant sloth and the woolly mammoth and a couple others, but in their de-extinction process they have edited out their aggressive traits, and so it's supposed to be a safe place. Well, these newlyweds, they're in their tent at night. Their guide is a little way off, and the only reason they got a guide is to show them the animals, because both the husband and the wife, the newlyweds, they're both experienced hikers. And so the guide is a little way off to give them their privacy, and something rips through their tent, and the husband goes out, and the wife hears something suspicious. So she goes out, she doesn't see him, she screams. The guide, who is, like I said, a little ways off in a different tent, he hears the scream, and he has to, like, he gets dressed, he runs out there, and all he finds is two huge puddles of blood. And so they bring in the Colorado Bureau of Investigation agent, Cash, this is going to be her first case as agent in charge. And she thinks it's going to be an open and shut case. I mean, something like Erebus resorts, with the de-extinction of the animals, they have a lot of enemies. They have people who don't like what they're doing. They have people who want to know how they did it. And so, like I said, she thinks it's going to be an open and shut case. But as time goes on, she's working with the local sheriff, Colcord, who is a, kind of small town guy. I don't really know how else to explain him. As she's working with him and they start to uncover layers, they find that there's perhaps a darker side to Erebus than they've been letting on. And meanwhile, her boss, which is McFall, he's a limelight guy. He likes to be at the center of attention. And so as they're peeling back these layers, he's like, well, you got to find out what's going on. It's making us look bad. And so Cash is like stuck between a rock and a hard place in this situation. And it's really interesting, like, what happened. I'm not going to say that the book wasn't interesting. I don't know what it was about the book that didn't make me love it. But one of the things that the book did, which was really annoying, was insist that it wasn't Jurassic Park. I don't know why it had to do that so much throughout the book. Like, it was like disdainful of Jurassic Park. And I can't, like, I don't know, just the way that it did it made me feel like I can't say the book didn't read a book, but it made me feel like maybe the author didn't read Jurassic Park or understand Michael Crichton. So it was a little irksome. But in the end, it was a really interesting and I think a new take on certain things. So like I said, I did like it. I didn't love it. But Douglas Preston is one of my authors that I will usually gravitate towards if I see something by them. And then I read Strange Folk. Now, Strange Folk I started, I think, a couple days before we left, and then like our last couple days we were running around like crazy, so I didn't get to read too much of it while we were on vacation, but I have finished it since we've gotten back. Now, a while ago, I did a review on In the Hour of Crows, and that one was Appalachian witchy lore, and I loved it. So Strange Folk is also Appalachian witchy lore, which is interesting. I guess it's this new subgenre, and it's not a bad thing. I'm absolutely loving it. In fact, my husband and I went to one of the local hobby shops in town, the Flying Monkey Comics, and I saw this on their counter, and it was screaming to me. So it's the Old Gods of Appalachia. It's an RPG game, and it's the, I think this is the one he said that he got from the, what's that thing where people put their stuff up for money. I can't remember it. But he got it from there, and it came with like dice and a map and coins, and like at the time I was like, no, I'll just take the book and the map, but I'm gonna have to go back for the dice and the character portfolios. It's like a Cthulhu type of Dungeons and Dragons is what it said. But what got me, of course, was the Old Gods of Appalachia, since I've been reading these Appalachian witchy magic books. Anyways, back to Strange Folk. So Strange Folk follows Lee, who left Craw Valley when she was 18. She leaves with a bittersweet past. Her father died. Her mother, after her father died, became an addict and took Lee away from her grandmother Belva. And she thought her grandmother Belva would help her, but when she ran away to Belva's, Belva took her back to her mom's and said, you have to do what your mom says. So Lee leaves. She has no intentions of coming back. She gets married. She has 2 kids. The younger kid, which is the boy, his name is Cliff. He's different. The father thinks that the way to fix his differentness is to send him to therapists. And a little bit about the father. Lee's husband is rich. She feels like she was a novelty to him when they were first dating and first married, but over time, like, she has started to feel more and more unwelcome in his world, which is a world of money. And when he starts making Cliff try to be less Cliff, she's like, okay, that's enough. But she doesn't really have anywhere to go, so she goes home to Craw Valley, and she stays with Belva. And all this time, her kids, Cliff and the older girl, Meredith, have thought that Lee's mother was dead. But Belva mentions Redbud, which is Lee's mother, and at that point, Lee and Meredith kind of start, there's a gulf that's growing between them. Up until now, Lee has felt that her and Meredith and Clifford have had their own little clan. They've been close. They're the oddlings out. None of them really felt like they belonged in the dad's world. But there's something happening. Somebody ends up dead, and it wasn't a tragedy by any means, when you know what the man was doing, but the way that he died and where he was laid out made it look like Belva had something to do with it. because she had her circle of I hesitate to say witchy, but I mean witchy friends from church and other places. And this is another one of those books, just like in the Hour of Crows, where it doesn't make this. There's a line between Christians and people who practice magic or witch or folklore stuff, and it was. I don't know, refreshing maybe isn't the right word for it, but it was, I liked it because it didn't just pit these two different beliefs against each other, because that's not how it's always been. Different beliefs haven't always been pitted against each other necessarily. Like, there's been, like, lines blurred. Like, if you consider, like, Santeria and Catholicism, especially in the South, like, there's always been, this kind of mixture of cultures and religions and backgrounds, and so this is one of those books. And so she has some of her church friends come and help her in a circle to kind of make this guy stop doing what he's doing, but then he ends up dead. And so Lee starts to ask questions, and everybody seems to think that Belva did it, even though Belva is the town healer, and everybody, when they have a problem, they go to Belva. But of course, when something bad goes wrong, she's the local witch, so they blame her. She starts seeing a guy from her childhood, but then something else happens, somebody else dies, and he starts to look at Belva askance also. And so he's asking Lee questions, and there's this kind of spat because Lee's like, no, Belva wouldn't do that. And of course Meredith is being rebellious at this point, and she's talking to Redbud, and Redbud is telling her that she's going to teach her the old ways, which Lee has kept her away from all this time. And it just kind of snowballs from there. It was a phenomenal book, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm really liking this subgenre of Appalachian witchy fantasy. I'm not really sure how to categorize that, but it's really interesting. Obviously, it's caught my attention because I grabbed that RPG. Now we have played Dungeons and Dragons a couple times, but we're more Magic the Gathering people. Like me, John, our kids. We play Magic the Gathering. We tried Dungeons and Dragons, but it's hard to get kids to play Dungeons and Dragons. Magic, yes, because depending on how well somebody's deck is, you might be done with their game of Magic in like an hour and a half. But Dungeons and Dragons is more in depth, and keeping them at the table to play Dungeons and Dragons has been something that we just couldn't do. But my nephew and his fiance are moving close by, and I showed them the book, and the fiance said that she would love to learn to play, so hopefully we have some people to play this game and then maybe get back to Dungeons and Dragons, so that'll be fun. I digress. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe below.